Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and we're back with some more Total War Warhammer 3 news. So Creative Assembly have just released the faction mechanics for the Khorne faction, and it sounds pretty interesting. I've already had a look through, as obviously we get a little bit of early access so we can make our videos. So let's not waste any more time, jump right in, discuss, and see what it is. So we have the first mechanic known as Skulls and the Skull Throne. Very thematic, so let's just read over it. Well, it simply wouldn't be Khorne without skulls, would it? Such is the importance to Khorne of his most beloved body part, that skulls form as important a currency for his warriors as favour and gold for other factions. Luckily in-game, with a title like Total War, just about everything you do is going to generate them. Battles, sieges, post-battle decisions, dilemmas, buildings, and anything else. Skull piles are even spawned by enemy armies doing battle, so you can collect the proceeds from your enemies fighting among themselves. Khorne does not care from whence the blood flows, or the skulls come. Skulls are used for a couple of things, but the deadliest is piling on the Skull Throne. Whenever a large stockpile has been collected, it is expected, nay demanded, that it be lain at the feet of Khorne, such that he may pile the Skull Throne ever higher. Doing so rewards you with a massive set of buffs, including bonuses to post-battle loot and movement range bonuses after raising settlements. For it is the nature of this beast to continuously fight and destroy, with little regard for the building of civilization. If Khorne must occupy a settlement, it will be at a significant cost of skulls, as the place must be properly adorned, the buildings set just right, and the proper rituals enacted to explain exactly why the buildings are not torn down with the people. Sacking and razing are better options 90% of the time. Khorne has a unique set of options after destroying a settlement, but that doesn't have to be the end. Okay, so let's discuss this before moving on. I like the idea of getting skulls from pretty much everything. It just means that we're going to be building stuff like slaughterhouses and something like that. It just sounds like that, I guess. Now, the only thing I do think is a bit odd is getting the skulls from other people's battles. Khorne is a god of honor, of course, and picking up skulls from someone else's victory doesn't seem too lore-friendly. Again, this is gameplay over lore, and it might work out quite well. Though, I can't wait to see how this works. Does this mean, like, we can just pretty much have an agent moving around? Or, I guess, just an army will be able to pick stuff up? Which kind of makes sense. Now, we are aware that we can occupy settlements, which is obviously good. We already know that these aren't going to be hordes anyway, so that's fine. But 90% of the time, it's better just to sack or raise. So I wonder how this is going to work, because obviously you're going to need bastions, and it would be nice to know if we could take cities throughout the Empire and so on. I'm assuming we can if this option is here. I like the idea of raising and sacking settlements. Hopefully we'll get something like the Beastmen stuff though, like building a settlement will allow us to have blood grounds like the Beastmen, or else people are just going to keep resettling. But I have no major complaints, everything sounds fun, so let's move on to the Blood Calls. When a Khornate force overruns a garrison, the settlement is doomed. If they are lucky, a quick death will follow, but the purpose of that death is varied. Two new options are available to Khorne forces raising a settlement. Skulls for the Skull Throne generates 1,000 skulls for your purposes, destroying the settlement and killing the people. Predictable if useful. Okay, before anything, it says 1,000, we don't know exactly just yet if they might change that or not. Keep in mind that they are still working on the game, so that might change. Now let's move on. Blood for the Blood God greatly replenishes your forces and spawns a new Blood Host army nearby. This army cannot replenish or recruit, but is otherwise unlimited in its capabilities and costs no upkeep. The power of these armies scales with how many you have created, though the number of units they spawn can be increased through various means. Oh, that sounds pretty cool, to be honest. So you'll be able to keep getting more and more armies. That's very interesting. I like that. No upkeep is of course fantastic, because if we're going to be mostly raising and sacking settlements, yeah, we'll get some income, but not that much. But let's move on to the next paragraph. As you can imagine, this army can then wander off and raise another settlement, spawning another army, who can then team up with their friends and head off to another settlement, and so on. Okay, this is sounding pretty fun, to be honest. These armies spawn with their full movement available, so they can get going almost immediately. Obviously, as time goes on and they suffer attrition, losses in battle, and more, they will begin to lose potency. But of course, any skulls generated from a suicidal battle are just as valuable to Khorne. This is pretty cool, so you're going to be able to keep on moving. It's like the Beastmen mechanic, but just moving further a little bit, which, yeah, I like this. It is important to note that obviously Khorne is a melee-focused army with very little range, just one artillery unit, so obviously they needed to add in some really cool and thematic stuff for Khorne to make sure that he just has some potency, of course. The last paragraph is as follows. Redoubling the power of these armies is passive colonization. Should a Khornite faction have a settlement in a province it shares with raised settlements, those settlements would eventually automatically be colonized at no cost by that faction. Of course, someone else can come along and take it first, but well, that's what bloodletters are for. This means that you can spawn armies or harvest skulls and favor all you like, and eventually take the settlement anyway. Speaking of bloodletting, okay, so they get you the settlement anyway as long as you keep a hold of it by means of letting it stay destroyed. It sounds confusing, but no cost is going to be great. Again, melee focused faction, which is not going to have any magic and like no range whatsoever. Stuff like this is going to be very useful, especially at harder difficulties. I quite like this is kind of fun. Okay, so the next mechanic is known as Bloodletting. Khornate armies exist for war and slaughter. Fighting sustains them as milk and bread may keep a mortal man ready to serve. Should they stop, they will begin to fade to nothing, lower replenishment and lower growth faction-wide, as well as less lust for battle from the army itself. The opposite is also true. For every army you have that is rampaging across the land, it will have an impact on your growth rate, replenishments, global recruitment time, and more. As you can imagine, having a number of Bloodhost armies all increasing your growth rate along with your main more powerful armies is extremely powerful. With the amount of death and destruction handed out by a Khorne faction on a regular basis, they can also exist at a negative favor gain if needed, given the constant influx from battles fought. Okay, so again, it's pushing for you to be very, very aggressive, which makes a lot of sense with Khorne, and the less aggressive you are, the more negatives you'll get, which, yeah, sounds really, really good. This is very much how you expect a Khornate faction to handle itself, especially if you know anything from the lore of Warhammer Fantasy, Age of Sigmar, even 40k. They always pretty much have to be fighting, or else they kind of just start infighting, which would make no sense here, but with lower replenishment rate and stuff like that, that can actually hurt you. So yeah, being active is good. I like this. This next section is known as Unholy Manifestations and Cults. I'm going to have both the text and the in-game screenshot, and we'll discuss them both. First, let's go with the text. As we mentioned in our previous Tzeentch-based mechanics blog, there are a few shared areas for each Chaos God, Unholy Manifestations and Cults. They are special powers that can be used based on your corruption total and developing foreign building slots in other factions respectively. The Unholy Manifestations are Eternal War, unlocked from the start, spawns a small Khornate army to attack your own army, triggering Bloodletting, giving you skulls, favor, and XP from battle. So yeah, this is kind of needed. I know a lot of people might think that this is a bit much, but keep in mind, again, no magic, no range, so this is going to help you level up your armies, it's going to help you with all your other mechanics, and more importantly, it's going to keep your armies on par. You want to level them up as much as possible because everyone else is going to, and if you play on harder difficulties, you know how quickly those enemy armies do level up really, really fast, so you're going to want to keep up with them too. So yeah, I kind of like this. Plus, the idea of spawning an army that you have to fight, I mean, it's very Khorne. The second is Call of Battle, requires 1000 global Khorne corruption, gives an army plus 50% campaign movement range, self-explanatory, and yeah, kind of works. You want to be able to move. There's a few areas across the Warhammer world which takes a long time to move, more specifically, I'd say Lustria, and I don't think many of us are going to be going to Lustria very early on, but if you want to, that will help. The third one is Slaughter Incarnate, requires 2000 global Khorne corruption, and it doubles an army's skull gains from battles for several turns. Oh, okay, only one army. It's going to have to be one of your doom stacks at that point then, because you're going to want it to blast and not die out. The art says that the cooldown is for 15 turns, but that's just for Eternal War. Hopefully there are ways to make that cooldown just pass by quicker, so that way you could have a few armies with this buff, which would just be nice. It's not needed, but it would just be nice. And the last one is Khorne's Glare, requires 3000 global Khorne corruption, disables a friendly army's movement for several turns. At the end, it raises the local settlement automatically and places a massive number of skulls. Okay, so the way I'm interpreting this, and a few other creators are doing the same way too, because we do obviously do chat, is it kind of works like the whole hidden bomb for the Skaven, but rather than it being hidden, it is very active, people can see it, and that means that enemies can go and attack you in order to stop it. Which means that you're going to want to have one of your high tier armies holding out, but this could prove well if it is indeed a massive number of skulls. I mean, yeah, it sounds cool, doesn't it? Obviously, we've got the artwork on screen, which looks pretty cool. I guess that those marks are the global corruption? Yeah, I think so. It kind of looks like it. But now we can move on to the cults. Actually, we have a little bit of text here which says pretty strong stuff, and remember that if Khorne is ascended in the Great Game, all their effects are increased even further. I need some Great Game mechanic blog. This sounds really cool, because obviously we've speculated about this in the past, because it is so important in lore, and I'm really curious to see how they're going to do it. This sounds pretty fun. Okay, now on to the cults. As for cults, Khorne's potential blood cult buildings includes... Hideout generates a steady supply of skulls per turn, that was kinda expected. Fighting Pit gives bonus skulls with every battle fought in the province, again expected, and would be quite useful in those provinces which have like 4 different settlements. Maybe they might have some more. It would be interesting to see maybe Cathay having settlement provinces with 5 or 6 settlements. Kinda makes sense? You can also do something kind of interesting, which is leave a settlement in an area where there's a lot of potential enemies and they're just coming for you constantly. So if you manage to sneak an army into, say, for example, Altdorf or something like that. Lodge generates a large supply of skulls per turn if a lord of any faction is present. Any faction? Okay, sounds pretty cool. You could probably abuse that though if you get like a faction down to 1 settlement and just allow them to recruit a lord, kill it, and then allow them to recruit another one, and so on. And finally, Arena destroys the cult upon completion, but teleports your faction leader and their army to the settlement. Don't know what they would possibly do to an enemy city once they get there. It is a mystery. I really like that. That's kind of like the whole lore aspect. It happens a lot with Skarbrand in lore, where, say, for example, he gets randomly summoned, and a army would follow him because they know if he's going to get summoned somewhere, there's going to be a lot of fighting. I must admit, that sounds really fun, and yeah, like, top notch. I'm really into that. The next section is the tech tree. So before we get into the text, we're just going to look at the in-game screenshot, because, you know, that type of stuff is always cool. We can see the skulls in the top right-hand corner, where he's got 3,675 at the moment. And yeah, okay, so different pillars, which makes sense. This is how Khorne kind of gives his edicts, in a sense. And there are 8 technologies, which, again, per section, because 8 is the mystical number of Khorne, it looks like you'll need 3 techs from each one to be able to move on to the next, which is pretty cool. Some of them do cost skulls, which kind of expected too. If you're going to use it as your main resource, you're going to want to use it here too. And I've just remembered that Tzeentch does the same thing with Grimoires, so yeah, we can see a few obvious things here, like Rage Within seems to possibly focus on your mortals, because it is a mortal there. Hungrier Spawn to boost up your Chaos Spawn. There's an interesting one there, Little Brother's War, which we can see a Mark of Slaanesh. Now, of course, Khorne hates Slaanesh. It's one of the rivalries that happens within the Great Game, so maybe this is going to boost you up when fighting against Slaaneshi factions? Which I really hope Slaanesh has something going the same way backward. It would be cool, but like, I'm excited. But let's read over the text now. Khorne's tech tree surrounds the number 8, with various pillars of techs available with 8 techs each. Only 3 of them are required to move to the next pillar. There are 8 pillars in total. Oh wow, this is going to be a pretty big tech tree then. This gives you a lot of options as to how quickly you want to move through the tree and what you want to prioritize when. As you can imagine, much of Khorne's tree involves the slaughter of his enemies, with one entire pillar dedicated to 8 techs, just with bonuses for fighting specific factions. The rest are a mix of technologies, for making units better, cheaper, faster to recruit, and such forth. You can also buff blood hosts, and you can choose to colonize ruins with Drawn to Destruction. The majority of techs cost skulls to research, Khorne not giving up his secrets with a donation to the throne. You must prove your might in battle to receive his gifts. Passive gains of skulls are also available, though one comes with a diplomatic penalty with all other factions. But come now, you weren't hiring Bloodletters and Skull Crushers to make peace, were you? Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, and we're going to have a lot of penalties, it can be assumed. In fact, there is a diplomacy section coming up now that we'll discuss. Yeah, it sounds interesting, and it makes sense for skulls to be linked up to the tree. It only gives you more reason to be more aggressive, as we discussed earlier in the video, and yeah, I mean, this is sounding cool. I must admit, I wasn't too hyped up for Khorne, because, you know, no range, but if you're going to be hyper-aggressive, and you're going to be able to get loads of armies out, it might be fun. It might be fun. The next section is Coronate and Demonic Diplomacy, so this is also going to give us a little bit of information on how diplomacy for the demon factions is going to work. One element worth noting is that the mortal peoples of the world are not fans of their demonic invaders from the north. War is automatically declared between any non-Slaanesh demonic faction and any non-demonic faction it meets, with a couple of exceptions. Skaven are just mad scheming enough to consider alliances, while Norskins and the Warriors of Chaos, of course, mortal servants. Okay, so I know some people might get confused about the Slaanesh meaning there. I've already asked for context, and it's just basically using any demon faction here. So Slaaneshi factions will declare automatically against Imperials and so on, and Khornate factions will do the same against Imperials and so on. I was thrown off too and had to get a little bit of context there. Now, let's move on. Everybody else, not so much. Demons may ally with demons, but there's always rivalries, and Khorne in particular has a great hate of Slaanesh, despising the indulgences and eccentricities of his sibling. Boy, I'm just waiting for my Slaaneshi boys to show up, please. Also unique to Khorne are a number of diplomacy debuffs from technologies and decisions. Raising every city you come across and massacring the population really does not make you popular, nor does cutting the heads off everyone you meet and harvesting their souls for the god of slaughter. The Exiles of Khorne, Skarbrand's warband, even has diplomatic penalties with other Khornate factions, his legendary portrayal of their master far too much to forgive. Okay, yeah, that sounds interesting. Like, we've already discussed this with the diplomacy stuff. Yeah, we weren't really expecting a lot of diplomacy options here, though it does make sense to have some. I do like the fact that Skarbrand is pretty much just hated by his own guys too. It's going to be curious how to see that, because sometimes non-aggression pacts can help, but yeah, this is going to be fun. I mean, Creative Assembly even put it out here, the note here being, don't play Khorne to make friends, play Khorne to make war. Total war, probably. And yeah, this is pretty much what we're expecting from Khorne. Everything sounds so good so far, and yeah, hopefully we'll be able to see some gameplay. I'm really curious to see how Khorne is going to have a campaign. Like, all the others we're kind of expecting in a certain sense, but, you know, no range, no magic. It's going to be weird. Though, if it's done well, if Creative Assembly can pull this off, it should be a fun faction. There's no more information at the end, it's just a few footnotes here and there, just saying what you want to do, and it's pretty much being a Khornate, yeah? Just get into battle and more battle and more battle. But this does sound quite interesting. I'm honestly impressed. Hopefully this means that we're going to be moving on to the pre-order incentive soon, and obviously Slaanesh and Nurgle, because a lot of us are quite curious. I've been waiting for Slaanesh for quite some time now. But Khorne looks interesting. I'm wanting to see how it works in campaign, because obviously written out, it can say one thing, and some stuff can change by the time that they're willing to show campaign. It's just the case of, again, it's going to be a very, very different style of gameplay, very much like the vampire counts, but without magic, so, you know, it's a bit odd. So far so good though, this does sound cool, the mechanics so far have been sounding quite interesting, Creative Assembly are clearly going full ham with this, and, you know, more power to them. The fact is they're getting to experiment, and they're pulling a lot of stuff out from obscure facts of lore and so on, or just stuff that makes common sense from a lore perspective into gameplay. I know a lot of people don't like hearing lore, but it is kind of important sometimes, and I think it's being represented really, really well with Khorne. But what do you guys think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and let's start a bit of a discussion. I'm rather curious, because obviously I know a lot of people weren't hyped up for Khorne, But this sounds pretty
with that,
cool.
my friends, we've come to the end of our video. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, might I suggest giving the video a like, or even subscribing to the channel, as it really does help us out. In the description section below are various links to different social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, and Discord. Also in the description section is an affiliate link with Element Games where you could buy loads of hobby-based products, not just Warhammer, for 10 to 25% off. Making a purchase using that link and also our special code, which is also in the description, supports the channel at no extra cost to you, which we think is rather cool. A big thank you to our patrons. Your support means the world to us. It's amazing that people want to help a small channel like us grow and get to a higher level of content. A big thank you to Gibraltar LUSC, Ryan Bertsche, Andrew Prince, and Okro for subscribing to us at our Fane level. You guys are super cool. And a big thank you to Edward Yule, VS Vasan, Aaron Whitman, and Shaggy for subscribing to us at our King level. Honestly, we can't thank you all enough. And lastly, a big thank you to all of you for liking, sharing, and commenting on these videos. Honestly, it's because of you guys that the channel's been growing at such a great pace lately, so we can't thank you all enough. But with that, my friends, thank you so much for watching once again, and we shall see you all again very, very soon. Have a good day.